All right, if you will turn in your Bibles to the book of Deuteronomy. This evening we're going to be digging into Deuteronomy. It's a marvelous book. It has a lot of information for us. And I'm going to divide the book into two parts. One part I'll give this evening, and the next part I will give next week. The word Deuteronomy means repetition of the law. The Jews refer to the book of Deuteronomy as the book of words. Christians know it as the second giving of the law. We might call it a history for the new generation. As you know, Deuteronomy is the fifth and final book of the Pentateuch, better known as the Torah. That's the way the Jews refer to it. Moses is the author, except for a little account in the book of Deuteronomy that deals with his own death. This part was probably written by Joshua after Moses had died. The book is full of good information. It is a treasure house for the church. It's one of the four most quoted books in the New Testament. It's quoted in the New Testament at least 83 times. Jesus was very familiar with the book of Deuteronomy. It might have been his favorite book. And when he was led into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil, he quoted 3 times from the book of Deuteronomy. While he was in the desert, the devil said to him, "Now, if you are the Son of God, command these stones to be made bread." And Jesus responded, "Man shall not live by bread alone." That's Deuteronomy chapter 8 and verse 3. Satan comes back a second time, and he said to Jesus, "Throw yourself down from the temple. It is written that the angel will protect you." And Jesus comes back by quoting from Deuteronomy 6 and verse 16, when it said, "Thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God." Satan comes a third time and said to Jesus, "Bow down and worship me." And again, Jesus quotes from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 6 and verse 13. He said, "You shall not worship. You shall worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve." Evidently, Jesus found this book to be a source of strength, and he used it in dealing with the worship of God, found in Matthew chapter 22 and verse 37, where it said, "And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy mind, and with all thy strength." The major emphasis in Deuteronomy is worship. How to worship God, why to worship God, and when to worship God. So we might say that the book is a treasure house for Christians, and it is a guideline for Christian behavior. The Israelites are encamped at Kadesh Barnea, which is in the land of Moab, and they're getting ready to go over the Jordan River into the land of Canaan that God had promised to give to Abraham and to his descendants. The book is made up of 3 major addresses by Moses. The first address is found in chapter 1 and goes through chapter 4, verse 40. It was spoken to the Hebrews on the east side of Jordan. If you look at Deuteronomy chapter 1 and verse 1, it said, "These be the words which Moses spake unto all Israel on this side of Jordan, in the wilderness, in the plain over against the Red Sea." And of course, that is the east side. And the first address deals with what happened to the older generations. And then he goes on to tell them that it's only 11 days' journey from Mount Sinai, or Horeb, it's used in the book of Deuteronomy, to Kadesh Barnea. And they were there, ready to go over into the land, but rebelled and would not go. And as a result of that, they were given 40 years of wandering around in the wilderness. And now Moses is speaking to the new generation. The older generation has died. And he reveals to them and tells them about what God did in bringing about their deliverance. The second address is given in chapter 4 and goes all the way through chapter 26. It's the longest of the three, and it deals with general principles of the law. They're divided into 9 parts. I'm not going to go into those parts today because we'll look at them later on in our study. And then the final message is given in chapter 29 and going all the way through verse 34. Now, with that introduction, let's go back and look at the first few chapters and the first message that Moses gives to the people. It was given on February the 15th, 40 years after the Jews left Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai. The older generation who came out of Egypt have all died. The younger generation is now encamped in the wilderness. They're all camped in the wilderness of Moab. Right across the Jordan River is the city of Jericho, and this is in the promised land that God promised to give to the children of Israel. A high platform has been erected. Speakers have been put in place around the platform. People have gathered as far as you can see. There is nothing but people. Moses is now 120 years old. I can see him as he climbs the steps to go up on the platform. He takes his seat in a high swivel chair. He clears his throat, and then he said, "My dear fellow countrymen," you remember he's giving this discourse to that new generation, children that were born maybe in Egypt but too young to know anything. The older generation, their foreparents, their fathers and mothers, have all died. And so he addresses the new generation. And he said to them, 40 years ago, God led our forefathers out of Egyptian bondage and into this land. He said they crossed the Red Sea and came to the desert of Sinai. And here they pitched their camp. There was about 2 million of them, over 600,000 men, and then women and children, and some strangers that wanted to leave Egypt along with them. In the meantime, while they were encamped, God spoke to me and told me to come to the top of the mountain, Mount Sinai. I went, and it was there that God gave me the 10 Commandments. These 10 Commandments were all written on 2 tables of stone by the finger of God. And these laws, said God to me, are to be taught to my people, and they are to be a guide to my people from now on. Well, after a few days, God spoke to me again, and he said to me, Moses, you have stayed here long enough. Go and occupy the land of Canaan. I promised that land to Abraham long ago, and now I'm going to give it to his descendants. I'm going to do what I promised I would do. Well, we left Sinai and traveled 11 days' journey to Kadesh Barnea. As I mentioned earlier, Kadesh is on the east side of the Jordan, only 11 days' journey from Mount Sinai. And once we got there, God spoke to us and said to us, go and possess the land which I've given to your fathers. Don't be afraid. I know the walls may be high, the people may be great, but I'm going to give you victory over them. Moses paused. And then he said, a terrible thing happened at Kadesh. The people thought that it would be better for them to send some men into this land in Canaan to check it out, to spy it out. And so we agreed to send 12 men into the land. These 12 men traveled throughout the land of Canaan. In fact, they spent 40 days there, and then they returned and they gave their report. It was a divided report. 10 men said, we cannot take the land. Oh, they agreed that it was a great land, that it was a very flourishing, fruitful land, but they said, we cannot take the land. 2 of them, Caleb and Joshua, said, we can do it. God has promised to give us this land, and we can easily take it. However, the people believed the 10 instead of the 2, and they rebelled. They began to murmur against God. They complained. They said, God hates us. He brought us out of Egypt into this wilderness that he might kill us. Well, I tried to assure them that God had delivered them and that God would still protect them. I reminded them what God had done in Egypt, how he had provided for them in the wilderness. But my advice fell on deaf ears. Well, after thinking it over for a few days, some of the leaders of the generation came to me and said, we changed our mind. We're going to fight against the Amorites and the others. We're going to fight against them. And God said, no, don't do it. But they went anyhow. And the Amorites, unfortunately, chased them, killed a number of them, and we had to flee back from Kadesh Barnea, and we turned back into the wilderness. And for 38 long years, we moved up and down the wilderness and finally found ourselves again at Mount Sinai, where originally we had started out. And once again, the Lord spoke. And here in chapter 2 of verse 1, the Lord said, you have stayed here long enough. I want you to turn northward. God told me to instruct the people and to tell them exactly what to do. He said, you are going to pass through the Edomite territory. Don't start a fight with them. I'm not going to give you the Edomite territory. I gave that land to Esau and to his descendants, and I always keep my word. When you are passing through their territory, make sure that you get in touch with them and you pay them for everything. And so Moses said, we passed through their land. He said, they are going through, then you are going through the Moabite country. Once again, you are not to attack the Moabites because they are the descendants of Lot, Abraham's nephew. And God said, I'm going to give you this land. It will be yours. And again, God always keeps his promise. We did not attack them. Well, now today, we are back at Kadesh Barnea. And now God has given us some instructions as to what we are to do. Now he said, I want you to go into the land of the Amorites, and I want you to make war against King Sihon. Well, Moses said, I went back just as God said, and I sent some ambassadors to King Sihon, and I asked him to let us please pass through the land. We would not touch anything. We would not bother anything. And he said, no, you're not going to pass through the land. And so the Lord enabled us to crush them and to kill them. And next we turn to King Og of Bashan. You'll find this in chapter 3 of Deuteronomy. And we mobilized, and God told us not to be afraid. And so we were able to conquer King Og and all of the land. In fact, we were able to take 60 cities in all. And this land was divided and given unto the tribes of Reuben and Gad and a half tribe of Manasseh. They were to settle on the east side of Jordan. However, they were to, that is the men, they were to go over the Jordan to fight with their brothers once they came into the land of Canaan. They could leave their families behind, and their flocks could all stay behind, but they had to go over and fight. And once the land of Canaan had been conquered, then they could come back to the east side. And then God spoke to Joshua. He spoke to me first of all about Joshua. And God said to me, I have chosen Joshua to lead the people into the land of Canaan. Well, I begged God to let me go. I had been used of God to bring the children of Israel out of Egyptian bondage. I had led them for 40 years in their wilderness wander. And so I said, God, please, let me go into the land of promise, that land which you promised to Abraham. And God said to me, you're not going. Don't bother me anymore. Don't ask me anymore. And then God took me up to the top of Mount Pisgah, and he allowed me to look in. He allowed me to see that land. Well, later on, I did appear in the land. You'll find it in the book of Matthew in chapter 17 when Elijah and I appeared to Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. I did get to go into the land, but it was a long time later. Now, Israel, I want you to listen carefully, because these are the laws that God gave me to give unto you. You'll find them recorded in chapter 4. Do not add to them. Do not subtract. Do not worship idols. I'm a jealous God. These are my laws. They're good for you. I want you to obey my laws. Moreover, I want you to teach them to your children. I'm going to give them the 10 commandments that God originally gave me. You are not to defile yourself. You are a special people called of God, chosen of God, loved, because you were not great, but God placed his love upon you. And you are to obey what God said do. But if you do not obey, I'm going to destroy you and scatter you all over the land. And then God said to me, I want you to set aside 3 cities of refuge. This is found in chapter 4, verse 41. 3 cities of refuge which will be on the east side, so that if a person accidentally, unintentionally kills somebody, he can flee to one of these cities of refuge, and he can be safe until there's a trial to find out if it was intentional or not intentional. I set the cities aside. There will be 3 more set aside later on in the land of Canaan. And then Moses in chapter 5 continues his instruction. He said, the Lord made a contract with you at Mount Horeb, or Sinai. I stood there between you and God, and whatever God said, I passed it on to you. And then Moses repeats the 10 commandments. You'll find them originally in the book of Exodus in chapter 20. You remember them. Many of you grew up with them, but they are as follows. God said, do not make a graven image and do not bow down to it. Do not use God's name in vain. Whatever you say, let it be right and then follow it. I want you to keep the Sabbath day. You must honor your father and your mother. You must do no murder. Don't steal. Do not lie. Do not covet your neighbor's wife or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Whatever I've given to him, belongs to him. And then we come to chapter 6. And Moses said, now, if you will, I want you to please quote the Shema with me. Oh, I see that many of you do not know the Shema, just like it is in our day. But listen to what it says in Deuteronomy 6, verse 4 through 9. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy command, with all thy might. I command thee that you love me with all of your heart. And then you shall teach these to your children. Talk with them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down in the evening, and when you rise up in the morning. You shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them upon the post of your house and on your gate. And if you will go to Israel today, you'll find a lot of times on the doorpost of a house some of these words that have been written in the Shema. One day when Jesus was teaching, the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the scribes tried to trap him, and one of them, a scribe, came to Jesus and said to him, Jesus, what is the most important law of Moses? And Jesus quoted the Shema. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. With this, we're going to stop this evening, and we'll pick it up the next time. You listen in for the second part as we go into greater detail in the book of Deuteronomy.